The mountain didn't forgive mistakes. Caleb Rourke learned that the hard way, which was the only way the wilderness taught anything. 10 years alone on Iron Ridge had carved him down to something harder than the granite beneath his boots. Not better, not worse. Just reduced, like a tree stripped by lightning, still standing, but hollowed out where the heart used to be. He stood at the edge of his property line, squinting down at the town of Salvation Creek through the morning haze. Smoke rose from chimneys in lazy spirals. From up here it looked peaceful, pretty even, like a painting of the life he used to have. The lie lasted until he blinked. His cabin sat another mile up the ridge, built with his own hands from timber he'd felled and stone he'd hauled. No nails he hadn't hammered, no walls he hadn't raised. It was small, practical, and completely his. The kind of place where a man could disappear if he wanted to. Caleb had wanted to. For a decade, he'd managed it. Came down maybe twice a year for supplies, salt, ammunition, flour, when he could stomach the cost. Spoke to exactly nobody if he could help it. The shopkeepers knew him by sight, knew his money was good, knew not to ask questions. Perfect arrangement. But 3 days ago, his last tin of coffee ran out. Caleb could handle a lot of things. Loneliness, sure. Silence, absolutely. The nightmares that came with both, mostly. But going without coffee? That was asking too much. So here he was, working up the will to walk back into civilization. Supplies, he muttered to himself. In and out, 1 hour. The town hadn't changed much. Same dusty main street, same crooked hotel sign, same knot of men loitering outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, betting on dominoes and flies. A few of them glanced up as Caleb approached, then looked away fast. Good. He preferred it that way. The general store sat between the bank and a boarded-up millinery shop that had been boarded up since before Caleb left. He pushed through the door, triggering a bell that sounded too cheerful for his mood. Marcus Webb stood behind the counter, same as always. Older now, grayer, but his eyes still had that calculating sharpness that made Caleb's jaw tighten. Rourke! Marcus didn't smile. Didn't frown either, just stated a fact. Webb. Didn't expect to see you till fall. Coffee ran out. Marcus nodded like that explained everything. Maybe it did. He pulled out his ledger without being asked, already tallying. The usual? Yeah. While Marcus gathered supplies, Caleb's attention drifted to the window. More people than usual on the street. Clusters of them, talking low and urgent. Something was happening. Town's busy, Caleb said. Marcus didn't look up. Auction today. What kind of auction? The kind you don't want to know about. That should have been enough. Should have been the end of it. Caleb had spent 10 years perfecting the art of minding his own business. But something in Marcus's tone, disgust maybe, or shame, made him push. Try me. Marcus's hand stilled on a sack of flour. He looked at Caleb for a long moment, weighing something, then he sighed. Thomas Cross died 3 months back. Heart gave out. Left behind debts to half the territory and a daughter with no way to pay them. Caleb knew where this was going, felt his stomach turn before Marcus finished. Byron Hastings owns the debts now. He's calling them due. Today. Hastings, Caleb's voice flattened. Byron Hastings ran the Salvation Creek Bank the way a snake runs a rabbit hole, patient, quiet, and absolutely without mercy. What's he taking? The land? The girl. 2 words. That's all it took to crack something open inside Caleb's chest that he'd sealed shut years ago. The hell did you just say? Marriage auction. Marcus said it like the words tasted foul. Legal, technically. Old territorial law. A woman can settle debts through marriage contract if she consents. Hastings pushed the paperwork through, got the mayor to sign off. Whole thing's rotten, but there's not a damn thing anyone can do about it. Caleb's hands curled into fists. She consented? What choice does she have? It's this or debtor's prison. Hastings made sure of that. Where? Caleb, where's the auction, Marcus? The older man's expression shifted. Not quite fear, but close. Town hall. Started 20 minutes ago. But you walking in there won't help anything. It'll just... Caleb was already moving. The town hall was packed. Caleb stood in the doorway, taking it in. 50, maybe 60 people crammed into a space meant for half that. Men, mostly. Ranchers, merchants, drifters who'd crawled out of whatever holes they'd been hiding in for a chance at this. The air stank of sweat, tobacco, and desperation. At the front of the room, on a raised platform that usually held community announcements and Sunday sermons, stood a woman, Elena Cross. Caleb had never seen her before, didn't know her father, didn't know anything about her except what Marcus had said and what he could see right now. Dark hair pulled back severe, shoulders straight despite the rope binding her wrists in front of her, eyes fixed on something beyond the crowd. Not looking at anyone. Deliberately not looking. She wore a simple gray dress that had been mended at the sleeves. No jewelry, no decoration. They hadn't even let her dress herself properly for this. Beside her stood Mayor Guthrie, red-faced and uncomfortable, holding a sheaf of papers that rattled in his shaking hands. And next to him, calm as Sunday morning, stood Byron Hastings. Hastings was everything Caleb wasn't: polished, educated, connected. Dark suit tailored to perfection, hair oiled back, smile that belonged on a card sharp. He held himself like a man who'd never lost anything in his life and never would. "Gentlemen," the mayor was saying, voice cracking, "we have reached $800. Do I hear 9? 900, someone called from the back. 950, another voice closer. Caleb's vision tunneled. The edges of the room blurred. All he could see was Elena Cross standing there like a prisoner at her own execution, and every man in this room treating her like livestock. $1,000. This voice came from the front row, smooth, confident. Hastings. The room went quiet. Mayor Guthrie cleared his throat. "We have 1,000 from Mr. Hastings himself. Do I hear 1,100? Caleb hadn't meant to speak. The words just came out, rough and loud in the sudden silence. Every head in the room turned. Elena's eyes found his for the first time. They were brown, dark brown, like river stones, and they were absolutely fearless. Hastings turned slowly, his smile sharpening. "Well, Caleb Rourke, didn't know you were interested in civic affairs." "I'm not." "Then what are you doing here?" Good question. Caleb didn't have a good answer. Didn't have any answer except the one hammering in his chest like a second heartbeat. "This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong." 1,200, Hastings said, not breaking eye contact with Caleb. 1,500. Caleb stepped into the room. The crowd parted. Not out of respect, out of fear. He saw it in their faces, the way they leaned back as he passed, the way hands dropped to gun belts that weren't there. These people knew his name, knew his reputation. Good. 1,600, Hastings countered, still smiling, still calm. Caleb reached the front of the room, stopped 10 feet from the platform. He could see Elena more clearly now, the way her jaw was set, the slight tremor in her bound hands, the absolute refusal to cry. 2,000, Caleb said. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. That was real money, more than most men in this room saw in a year. Hastings' smile finally slipped, just a fraction. "You don't have $2,000. You sure about that?" They stared at each other. Caleb could feel the weight of the room pressing down, everyone watching, waiting. This wasn't about the money anymore. Both of them knew it. 2,500, Hastings said quietly. Final offer. Caleb didn't hesitate. 3,000. The mayor made a choking sound. "Mr. Rourke, do you have—" "I have it." Caleb's voice cut through the noise. "I have it, and I'm bidding $3,000 for Elena Cross." Silence. Complete silence. Hastings' face had gone cold. "You're making a mistake." "Won't be my first." "Going once?" The mayor stammered. "Going twice?" 4,000. The number landed like a thunderclap. Caleb felt it in his bones. $4,000. That was everything. More than everything. He had maybe half that in gold hidden at the cabin. The rest he'd have to— Elena was looking at him now, really looking. And in her eyes, he saw something that stopped him cold. A question. Not, "Who are you?" but "Why?" Caleb didn't have an answer for that either. "Going once," the mayor said weakly. Hastings leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper only Caleb could hear. "You can't protect her. You can't even protect yourself. Walk away now, Rourke, and maybe I forget this happened." "Going twice." Caleb thought about the cabin, the silence, The safety of being alone where nobody could hurt him and he couldn't hurt anyone else. 10 years of careful distance, about to evaporate because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He thought about Elena Cross's fearless eyes. Sold. The gavel cracked. To Caleb Rourke for... Wait. Caleb's voice rang out. I'm changing the terms. The mayor blinked. You can't... The law says she settles debts through marriage contract, right? Well, yes, but then we do it now. Here, make it legal before I pay a cent. Hastings went very still. You're serious? As a grave. Mr. Rourke, the mayor stammered. Marriage requires consent from both parties. The lady would have to... Miss Cross. Caleb turned to Elena fully for the first time. Up close, she was younger than he'd thought. Mid-20s, maybe. There was dirt under her fingernails and a bruise on her wrist where the rope had rubbed, and she was looking at him like she was trying to see through to his bones. I don't know you, Caleb said. Flat. Honest. You don't know me. But I know this. Whatever life you have with me on that mountain is going to be hard. Cold in winter, lonely year-round, and about as far from civilization as you can get without falling off the map. But it'll be yours, your choice, your freedom. He paused. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm just asking you to choose. The room held its breath. Elena's eyes never left his face. He watched her think it through, every angle, every risk. She was smart. He could see it in the way her gaze flicked to Hastings, then back to him. Weighing devils. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was lower than he expected, steady. What happens after I choose? We leave. Today. You never have to see any of these people again. And the debts? Become mine. Part of the contract. Why would you do that? Caleb almost smiled. Almost. Honestly, I have no idea. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. All right, Elena said. I choose you. The room exploded. Hastings surged forward. This is absurd. You can't just... Mayor Guthrie? Caleb didn't raise his voice, didn't have to. Perform the ceremony, now. The mayor looked like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. I need to check the paperwork, verify the... Do it now, or I walk out that door and you explain to Mr. Hastings why his money's going with me. That did it. Nothing motivated like threatened coin. 10 minutes later, Caleb Rourke and Elena Cross were married by a terrified mayor in front of a hostile crowd, while Byron Hastings watched with eyes like winter ice. The ceremony was 3 sentences and a signature. When the mayor said, "You may kiss the bride," Caleb froze. He hadn't thought that far ahead. Elena looked at him, waiting. There was a challenge in her gaze now. You started this. Finish it. Caleb stepped forward, slow, deliberate. He saw her breath catch, saw the way her shoulders tensed, but she didn't back away. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't romantic. It was a claim, a seal, a line drawn in the sand in front of everyone watching. Her lips were warm and she tasted like fear and defiance, and something else he couldn't name. When he pulled back, her eyes were wide. Surprised, maybe, but still fearless. We're leaving, Caleb said to the room at large. Anyone who follows us up that mountain won't come back down. He meant it. They heard it. He untied the rope around Elena's wrists with hands that didn't quite shake, then took her arm, gentle but firm, and led her through the crowd. No one tried to stop them. Outside, the sun was high and bright. Caleb had a horse tied at the general store. One horse. He hadn't planned on bringing anyone home. Elena looked at the animal, then at him. We're sharing? Unless you want to walk 15 miles uphill. I can walk. I'm sure you can, but we're not doing it today. He swung up into the saddle, then offered his hand. She stared at it for a moment, really considering telling him to go to hell. He could see it in her face. Then took it. She was lighter than he expected. He pulled her up behind him, felt her hand settle awkwardly on his waist. Hold on, he said. I am. Tighter. Mountain trails rough. Her grip tightened. He could feel the heat of her through his shirt. They rode out of Salvation Creek without looking back. The silence lasted about 2 miles. So, Elena said against his shoulder. Are you actually going to kill anyone who follows us? Yes. Just like that? Just like that. She was quiet for a moment. Have you killed people before? Yes. How many? Enough. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. More silence. The horse's hooves clattered against loose stone. They'd left the road behind, following a trail that was barely visible even to Caleb's trained eyes. Pine trees pressed close on both sides, thick and old. What's your first name? Elena asked. You know my first name. We just got married. I know it's Caleb. I don't know if you prefer it or if you go by something else. He glanced back at her. You worried about what to call me? I'm worried about everything. Seems practical to start with the small stuff. Fair enough. Caleb's fine. Okay, Caleb. She tested it out. How long have you lived on Iron Ridge? 10 years. Alone? Yes. Why? Long story. We have 15 miles. Caleb's jaw tightened. Not happening. I just married a complete stranger. I think I've earned at least the basics. You earned safety. That's what I promised, not my life story. He felt her stiffen behind him. Fine. Then tell me what you expect from me when we get to this cabin of yours. Expect? You bought me, Caleb. What do I owe you? The question hit him wrong, made his stomach turn. You don't owe me anything. Everyone owes everyone something. That's how the world works. Not on my mountain. She laughed. Actually laughed. Short and bitter. Right. So I'm supposed to believe you spent money you probably don't have to marry a woman you don't know out of pure charity. Nobody's that good. I'm not good. Caleb's voice came out harder than he meant. I'm the furthest thing from good. But I'm not him either. Him who? Hastings. Any man in that room. Anyone who'd look at another human being and see property. The silence that followed felt different, heavier. My father wasn't a bad man, Elena said quietly. He was just unlucky. Bad investments, worse timing. The ranch failed, he borrowed to keep it going, and when he died, Hastings owned everything, including apparently me. Not anymore. No. Now you do. That's not... Caleb stopped. Started again. Look, when we get to the cabin, you'll have your own space. We're not gonna... He couldn't find the words. Settled on, you'll be safe. From you? From everyone, including me. He felt her hands shift on his waist, not letting go exactly, just adjusting. Okay, she said finally. I believe you. He wasn't sure he believed himself, but... The cabin came into view just as the sun started its descent. It sat in a small clearing backed against a cliff face, with Iron Ridge rising sharp and gray behind it. Solid log construction, steep roof to shed snow, one chimney trailing lazy smoke from a fire Caleb had banked that morning. It looked exactly like what it was, a place built for survival, not comfort. Elena slid off the horse without waiting for help, landing with more grace than Caleb expected. She stood there, staring at the cabin, face unreadable. It's not much, Caleb said. It's better than debtor's prison. Low bar. I've learned to work with what I have. He dismounted, started unsaddling the horse. Elena watched for a moment, then moved to help without asking. She knew her way around tack, good hands, efficient movements. Ranch girl, he remembered. She'd grown up working. They worked in silence, the kind that wasn't quite comfortable, but wasn't hostile either. When the horse was settled and fed, Caleb led her inside. The cabin was one large room with a sleeping loft above. Stone fireplace on one wall, rough-hewn table and chairs, a few shelves stocked with essentials. His rifle hung above the door. His bedroll sat in the loft. Everything he owned, visible at a glance. Elena walked the perimeter slowly, touching things. The table, the shelves, the iron cookware hanging by the fire. She wasn't judging, he realized. She was mapping, figuring out where she fit in this space. There's a stream about 50 yards east, Caleb said. Water's clean. I check traps every morning, hunt twice a week if the weather's good. Firewood stacked on the north side. You'll want to... Where do I sleep? The question stopped him cold. The loft, he said. I'll take the floor. Don't be ridiculous. You can't sleep on the floor in your own home. I've slept worse places. So have I. She met his eyes. We can figure out something fair, take turns, or build a partition, or I'm not taking the loft. Why not? Because I can't share a bed with you. Because I can't trust myself that close. Because you're the first person who's been in this cabin in 10 years, and I don't know how to do this. Because I snore, Caleb said. You'll want the space. Elena's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Fine, I'll take the loft, but I'm building that partition. With what? I don't know yet. I'll figure it out. She probably would, Caleb realized. She had that look, the same one his mother used to get when she decided something needed doing and hell itself wouldn't stop her. I'll make dinner, he said instead. You should rest. I can help. You've had a long day. So have you. They stared at each other, deadlocked. Finally, Caleb sighed. Fine. You can cut vegetables. Knife's in the drawer. They moved around the kitchen space with careful distance, not quite avoiding each other, but not getting too close either. Caleb started a stew with dried venison and root vegetables. Elena worked opposite him, her movements methodical and practiced. Where'd you learn to cook? She asked. Had to eat. That's not an answer. Seems to be my specialty. She made a sound that might have been amusement. You're going to have to talk to me eventually, you know. We live together now. I talk. You grunt. There's a difference. Caleb felt something unexpected rise in his chest, something that might have been laughter, if he remembered how. He pushed it down. They ate in near silence as darkness fell outside. The stew was good, better with 2 sets of hands, Caleb had to admit. Elena cleaned her bowl without complaint, even accepted seconds. When the dishes were done and the fire banked for the night, they stood awkwardly in the middle of the cabin. So, Elena said, this is it. This is it. We're married. Legally, yes. But not really. Caleb looked at her, this stranger who was somehow his wife, standing in his cabin in a borrowed shirt because she didn't have anything else. I don't know what we are. Neither do I. She smiled then, just a little. I guess we'll figure it out. She climbed to the loft. Caleb heard her moving around up there, settling in. He laid out his bedroll by the fire, close enough for warmth, but not close enough to crowd. The cabin went quiet. Caleb lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, and tried not to think about the fact that there was another person in his space. Breathing, existing, real. He'd survived 10 years alone. Now he had to figure out how to survive with someone else. From the loft, Elena's voice drifted down. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for today, even if I don't understand why. He didn't answer, didn't know how. Eventually he heard her breathing even out into sleep. Caleb lay awake until dawn, watching shadows move across the walls, and wondered what the hell he'd just done. Outside, the mountains settled into night. And somewhere far below, in a town built on debts and lies, Byron Hastings sat in his office and planned his revenge. The first week passed in careful circles. Caleb woke before dawn, same as always. Built up the fire, started coffee, checked the perimeter. The routine hadn't changed in 10 years. What changed was the awareness, constant, inescapable, that someone else was there, moving in the loft above him, breathing, real. Elena adapted faster than he expected. By the 3rd day, she'd claimed a corner of the cabin for her things, what few she had. By the 5th, she'd reorganized his shelves in a way that actually made sense, though he'd never admit it. By the 7th, she was up before him, coffee already brewing when he came in from his morning check. You don't have to do that, he said. Do what? Get up early, make coffee, any of it. She poured 2 cups without looking at him. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I'm awake and bored. There's work if you want it. What kind of work? Caleb gestured vaguely at the world outside. Everything. Firewood needs splitting, traps need checking, garden needs weeding. Winter's coming and there's about 1,000 things that need doing before the first snow. Elena wrapped her hands around her cup, steam rising between them. Show me. So he did. They started with the garden, a small plot on the south side of the cabin where Caleb coaxed vegetables out of rocky soil through sheer stubbornness. Elena knelt in the dirt like she'd been born to it, pulling weeds with efficient movements, asking questions he actually had answers for. "These carrots are late," she said. "Planted late. Had a cold spring. You should cover them at night. Even this late in the season, it helps." "With what?" "Straw, pine needles, whatever you have." Caleb watched her work, dirt under her nails, hair falling out of its tie. "You know gardens." "My mother kept one, before she died." Elena didn't look up. "I was 12. Took it over after. Kept it going until my father sold the ranch piece by piece and there wasn't anything left to grow on." "How old were you when he died?" 24. 3 months ago." She sat back on her heels. "It was fast. Heart just stopped one morning. Didn't suffer, at least. That's something." "And Hastings?" Her jaw tightened. "Showed up at the funeral. Very respectful, very sympathetic. Told me he'd give me time to grieve before we discussed the debts. A week later, his men came with papers. Everything my father owed, all bought up and consolidated. Debtor's prison or the auction." She pulled another weed, harder than necessary. "So here I am." "Here you are," Caleb echoed. They worked in silence after that. Not uncomfortable exactly, just two people who didn't know each other yet, trying to figure out how much space to leave between words. By midday, the garden was clear and covered. Elena had been right about the pine needles. They'd hold heat better than nothing. Caleb filed that away with the dozen other small adjustments she'd made in a week that he should have thought of in 10 years. "What's next?" she asked. "You should rest." "I'm fine." "Elena, don't!" She stood, brushing dirt from her borrowed pants, his pants actually, cinched tight with rope because they were too big. "Don't treat me like I'm fragile. I'm not." "I can see that." "Then stop acting like I'm going to break if I work too hard." Caleb studied her. She was thinner than she should be, probably hadn't eaten regularly in months. There were shadows under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights, but her spine was straight, and her gaze was steady, and she was right. She wasn't fragile. "Traps," he said. "You want to learn? I'll teach you." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Lead the way." The trap line ran in a wide circuit around the cabin. 12 snares and 3 deadfalls placed at game trails Caleb had mapped over years. He showed her how to read sign, tracks in soft earth, disturbed brush, scat that told you what passed through and when. She absorbed it all with a focus that surprised him, asking smart questions, making connections he hadn't expected. At the 5th trap, they found a rabbit. "Quick death," Caleb said, kneeling to inspect it. "Broke its neck in the snare. Better than suffering." Elena crouched beside him. "Can you teach me to reset it?" "You sure?" "I need to know how things work here. All of it." So he taught her. How to position the snare, judge the height, secure the anchor. Her hands fumbled at first, unused to the wire, but she kept at it with stubborn determination until the loop sat right. "Good," Caleb said. "You're a fast learner." "I'm motivated." "By what?" She looked at him then, and he saw something hard in her eyes. "I survived an auction. I'm not going to die on this mountain because I couldn't figure out how to feed myself." "Fair enough." They continued the line in silence, checking each trap, resetting where needed. Elena watched everything, missing nothing. When they finished, the sun was past its peak, and Caleb's stomach was reminding him they'd skipped lunch. "We should head back," he said. "Can I ask you something first?" "You can ask." "No promises I'll answer." Elena gestured at the wilderness surrounding them. "Why here? Why live this far from everything?" "Told you. Long story." "We have time." "Not enough." She waited, just stood there, patient and immovable, and Caleb realized she wasn't going to let this go. Not today, maybe not ever. He sighed. 10 years ago, I killed a man." Elena's expression didn't change. "All right. That's it? All right? You already told me you'd killed people. I assumed there was a reason you were up here alone." She tilted her head. "Was it self-defense?" "Depends who you ask." "I'm asking you." Caleb looked away, down the mountain toward where Salvation Creek sat hidden in the valley. His name was Clayton Mercer. He owned the land next to my family's ranch. Good land, water rights, everything. My father wanted to buy it, expand our operation. Mercer wouldn't sell. "So you killed him for land?" "No." The word came out sharp. My sister was 16. Mercer was 43. He decided she was pretty, decided he wanted her, decided no wasn't an answer he had to accept. Elena went very still. I found her in the barn, Caleb continued, voice flat. He was drunk. She was crying. And He stopped, started again. I didn't think, just acted. By the time I stopped, he was dead and there was blood on my hands and my sister was screaming. What happened after? Sheriff came, took statements. Mercer's family had money, connections. My family had me, the hothead son with a temper everyone knew about. They called it murder. Judge agreed. I ran before they could hang me. And your family? Caleb's throat tightened. Haven't seen them since. Don't know if they're alive or dead. Don't know if they hate me or understand. I just know I can't go back. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither knew how to say. Finally, Elena spoke. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Caleb's head snapped up. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Her eyes were hard. You think I don't know what men like that do? You think I didn't see it in Hastings' eyes every time he looked at me? The only difference is Mercer was dumb enough to take what he wanted. Hastings was smart enough to buy it legal. That's not... You saved your sister. Maybe you did it wrong, maybe you did it messy, but you did it. That's more than most people would do. She paused. So yeah, I think you did the right thing. And I think running was smart because they would have hanged you for it anyway. Caleb stared at her. This woman he'd known for a week, standing in the wilderness like she belonged there, defending him for something he'd spent 10 years hating himself over. Come on, Elena said, turning toward the cabin. I'm starving, and that rabbit's not going to cook itself. They walked back in silence, but it felt different now. Lighter, somehow. Like something had shifted between them. Not trust exactly, but understanding. That night, Elena made stew while Caleb cleaned his rifle. They moved around each other in the small space with growing ease, less awkward than before. When dinner was ready, they ate by the fire, and for the first time since she'd arrived, the silence felt almost comfortable. Can I ask you something now? Caleb said. Elena looked up from her bowl. Fair's fair. Why didn't you fight it? The auction. You could have run. To where? I had no money, no family, nowhere to go. And if I ran, Hastings would have just found someone else to punish. Probably would have gone after the few friends I had left. She shrugged. At least at the auction, I could see what was coming. That's a hell of a way to live. It was the only way I had. Caleb thought about that. About choosing to face the worst rather than run from it. About standing in front of a room full of strangers and refusing to break. You're braver than me, he said quietly. I don't think so. You went back down that mountain. You didn't have to. Couldn't help it. Why? He'd been asking himself the same question for a week. Still didn't have an answer that made sense. Because it was wrong. Because no one else was stopping it. Because... He stopped, fumbled for words. Because you looked at me like you weren't afraid. Elena's expression softened. I was terrified. Didn't show it. Good. That was the point. She set down her bowl. My mother used to say fear's just fine as long as you don't let it run the show. Feel it, acknowledge it, then do what needs doing anyway. Smart woman. She was. I wish she'd lived long enough to teach me more. They fell quiet again, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, wind rattled through the pines. Inside, the fire crackled and popped. We should get some sleep, Caleb said eventually. Tomorrow's going to be harder. What's tomorrow? Hunting. Real hunting, not trap checking. You wanted to learn how things work here. Might as well start with the important stuff. Elena's eyes lit up. You're taking me. Unless you'd rather stay here. Not a chance. She climbed to the loft with more energy than Caleb had seen from her yet. He banked the fire and laid out his bedroll, listening to her settle in above him. Caleb? Her voice drifted down. Yeah? Thank you for telling me. About Mercer. He didn't answer. Didn't know what to say. Eventually, he heard her breathing even out. Caleb lay awake, same as every night. But for the first time in 10 years, the silence didn't feel quite so crushing. Morning came cold and clear. Caleb woke to find Elena already dressed. sitting by the rekindled fire with coffee in her hands and anticipation written all over her face. "You're up early," he said. "You said we're hunting. I'm ready. We haven't even had breakfast." "So let's eat and go." Caleb couldn't help it. He almost smiled. "You're really that eager to kill something?" "I'm eager to learn. There's a difference." They ate quickly, then Caleb pulled down his rifle from above the door. Elena watched him check it with the same focus she brought to everything. "Ever shot a gun?" he asked. "A few times. My father taught me the basics." "Show me." He handed her the rifle, watched her grip. It was wrong. Stance too narrow, elbows locked, weight all wrong. But the fact that she tried without hesitation told him what he needed to know. "All right," he said. "First lesson? Everything you just did was bad." Elena blinked. "Excuse me? Your stance, your grip, your posture, all bad. But that's fine. Means you don't have habits to unlearn." He moved behind her, adjusted her feet, shoulder width apart. "Bend your knees, weight forward, not back." She shifted, adjusting. Caleb reached around to correct her grip, trying to ignore how close they were, how he could smell pine soap in her hair. "Like this?" Elena asked. "Better. Now when you shoot, the rifle's going to kick. You need to be ready for it, not fighting it. Pull it tight into your shoulder, lean into the recoil." They spent an hour on dry firing, stance, and breathing. Elena absorbed it all with grim determination, adjusting when he corrected, asking questions when something didn't make sense. By the time the sun was fully up, she could at least hold the rifle without looking like it was about to jump out of her hands. "We'll practice with live rounds later," Caleb said. "Today's about tracking. Shooting's useless if you can't find anything to shoot at." They headed into the forest, moving slow and quiet. Caleb showed her how to read the woods, broken twigs that indicated passage, disturbed leaves, the difference between old tracks and fresh. Elena followed close, watching everything, mimicking his movements. 2 hours in, Caleb held up a hand. Elena froze. There, 30 yards ahead, barely visible through the undergrowth, a deer. Young buck, 2 points, browsing at the edge of a small clearing. Caleb gestured for Elena to raise the rifle. Her hand shook slightly as she brought it up, sighting down the barrel. He could see her breathing accelerate, see the tension in her shoulders. "Easy," he whispered, barely audible. "Deep breath. Let it out slow. Squeeze. Don't pull." The rifle cracked. The buck bolted, disappearing into the trees in 3 bounds. Elena lowered the rifle, face falling. "I missed." "You did. By a lot?" "Can't tell from here, but probably." Caleb took the rifle back. "That's fine. First shot's always hard." "How many shots did it take you?" "To hit something, 7. To actually kill something clean, about 20. Elena looked at him, surprised. "Really?" "Really. Hunting's not easy. That's why we practice." He shouldered the rifle. "Come on, let's see if we can find where your shot went." They tracked the bullet's path, finding the tree it had hit, 3 feet left and 2 feet high of where the deer had been. Elena stared at the splintered bark like it had personally offended her. "I'm terrible at this," she muttered. "You're new at this. There's a difference." "How long before I'm not terrible?" "Depends." "You willing to practice every day?" "Yes." "Then probably a month. Maybe less if you're lucky." Elena nodded, jaw set. "Then that's what I'll do." They continued hunting through the afternoon, finding nothing else worth shooting at but plenty of tracks to follow, plenty of lessons to learn. Caleb found himself talking more than he had in years, explaining things he'd learned through trial and error, things he'd forgotten he knew. Elena soaked it all in like water in drought, asked questions that showed she was thinking ahead, making connections. By the time they headed back to the cabin, empty-handed but not empty of purpose, Caleb realized something had changed. He was teaching, actually teaching, not just surviving, and she was learning, actually engaged, not just enduring. It felt strange. Good, but strange. That night, over a dinner of stored venison and root vegetables, Elena broke the comfortable silence. "Can I ask you something personal?" Caleb tensed. "Depends how personal." "Do you regret it, bringing me here?" The question caught him off guard. "Why would I regret it?" "Because your life was simple before, quiet. Now you've got someone asking questions, using your things, changing how you do everything. Caleb thought about it. Really thought about it. Honestly, I don't know. Ask me in a year. That's not an answer. Sure it is. Just not the one you wanted. Elena smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Fair enough. The weeks blurred together after that, falling into a rhythm that felt less forced with each passing day. Elena practiced shooting until her shoulder was bruised and her aim started to improve. Caleb taught her to track, to hunt, to read weather in the sky and danger in the wind. She taught him things too, though he suspected she didn't realize it. How to talk again. How to exist in the same space as another person without flinching. How to trust in small increments. They still didn't talk about the marriage. Didn't discuss what it meant or didn't mean. It existed in the space between them, acknowledged but unexamined, like a loaded gun everyone agreed not to touch. Then, 5 weeks after Elena arrived, everything changed. Caleb was checking the north trap line alone. Elena had stayed back to work on the garden when he found the tracks. Boot prints, fresh, leading up from the valley. 2 sets, maybe 3, moving with purpose. His blood went cold. He followed them carefully, rifle ready, until he found what he was looking for. A vantage point overlooking the cabin. Someone had been here, watching, recently. The disturbed ground was still fresh. Caleb's mind raced. Could be hunters who wandered too far. Could be drifters looking for shelter. Could be... He saw the paper pinned to a tree trunk and knew exactly what it was before he reached it. Wanted poster. His face, rendered in crude lines but recognizable. Reward, $500. Crime, murder. Last seen, Salvation Creek. Under it, written in fresh ink, "We know you're here, Rourke. We know about the girl. 1 week to bring her back, or we come get her ourselves." No signature, didn't need one. Caleb knew Hastings' handwriting. He ripped down the poster, pulse hammering. A week. They had a week before armed men came up this mountain looking for blood. Caleb ran back to the cabin. Elena was in the garden, dirt on her hands, humming something he didn't recognize. She looked up when she heard him coming, smile fading when she saw his face. "What's wrong?" He handed her the note. Her face went white. "Hastings." "Yeah." "How did he—" "Doesn't matter. What matters is he found us, and he's giving us a week to give you back." Elena's hands crumpled the paper. "I'm not going back." "I know." "No." She stepped closer, eyes fierce. "I mean it, Caleb. I'm not going back. I don't care what he threatens, what he promises. I'd rather die up here than go back to him." "You're not dying, and you're not going back." Caleb's voice was flat, certain. "But we need a plan." "What kind of plan?" "The kind that keeps you alive and him away from this mountain." He looked at the cabin, at the life they'd built in 5 weeks, at the woman standing in front of him with dirt under her nails and defiance in her eyes. "How good's your shooting now?" "Better than it was. Why?" "Because in a week, you might need to use it for real." Elena didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, just nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Then teach me." They spent the next 7 days preparing for war. Caleb started with the fundamentals, the things Elena would need if everything went wrong. Live ammunition this time, no more dry firing. They set up targets behind the cabin where the cliff face would catch stray rounds, and he put the rifle in her hands. "Forget everything except breathing," he said. "In through your nose, out through your mouth, slow and steady." Elena's first shot went wide. Her second hit dirt 2 feet from the target. Her third clipped the edge. "Better," Caleb said. Again. They fired until her shoulder was purple with bruises and her hands shook from fatigue. Then they fired some more. Caleb didn't let her stop until she could hit the center mass 3 times out of 5, and even then he only called it because the light was failing. "How many men do you think he'll send?" Elena asked that night, cleaning the rifle with movements Caleb had taught her. "Depends how angry he is. Could be 2, could be 10. "And if it's 10, then we're in trouble." Caleb didn't see the point in lying. "But we've got advantages. High ground, knowledge of the terrain, and the fact that most hired guns don't want to die for someone else's grudge." "What if they do want to?" "Then we make it expensive." Elena's hand stilled on the cleaning rod. "Have you done this before? Defended against multiple attackers?" "Once. Different circumstances." He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. Did you win? I'm here, aren't I? She resumed cleaning, thoughtful. Caleb, if this goes bad, it won't. But if it does, Elena. He waited until she looked at him. It won't. I'm not letting him take you. Period. Something passed across her face, too quick to read. Why? Why does it matter so much to you? Because I made a promise. You made a legal contract. That's different. Caleb opened his mouth, closed it. She was right. But that wasn't the whole truth, and they both knew it. Somewhere between the auction and now, between teaching her to shoot and watching her work the garden, between shared meals and quiet evenings by the fire, the contract had stopped being the point. He didn't know what to call what had replaced it. Get some sleep, he said instead. Tomorrow, we fortify. They spent the next day turning the cabin into something defensible. Caleb showed Elena how to stack firewood against the walls for extra cover, how to position water barrels where they'd be useful, how to create firing positions that offered protection and sight lines. She worked without complaint, hauling wood and stone until sweat soaked through her shirt. What about the windows? She asked. What about them? They're vulnerabilities. Someone could shoot through them. Caleb looked at the 2 small windows he'd put in for light and ventilation. She was right. We could board them up. Then we can't see out. We could leave gaps, narrow enough to shoot through, small enough to limit incoming fire. Elena nodded, already moving to gather boards. They worked together, measuring and cutting, fitting pieces into place. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional. By evening, the cabin looked less like a home and more like a fort. Think it'll be enough? Elena asked, standing back to survey their work. Depends on how determined they are. That's not comforting. Wasn't meant to be. Caleb wiped sweat from his forehead. But it's honest, and honest is all I've got right now. They ate cold rations that night, neither wanting to risk a fire that might give away their exact position. Elena sat with her back against the wall, rifle across her lap, eyes distant. What are you thinking about? Caleb asked. My father. How he'd hate this. All of it. She gestured vaguely at the fortified cabin, the weapons, the waiting. He was a peaceful man, believed in talking things through, finding common ground. He'd be horrified. He'd also be glad you're alive. Would he? Or would he think I should have just accepted what happened, paid the debts through proper channels instead of running away with a wanted man? Caleb studied her in the dim light. You think you ran away? Didn't I? No. Running away is giving up. What you did was survive. He paused. There's a difference. Elena smiled, sad and small. You always know what to say. That's the first time anyone's accused me of that. The third day brought rain, cold and persistent. They used it to their advantage, setting traps on the approaches to the cabin. Nothing lethal. Caleb wasn't trying to kill anyone who didn't need killing, but enough to slow attackers down, make noise, give warning. Tripwires here and here, he explained, stringing thin cord between trees. Anyone coming up the main trail hits these will hear the bells. What about someone who goes around? That's what these are for. He showed her the deadfalls he'd positioned on the alternate routes, heavy logs balanced on triggers. Spring one of these, and either they're pinned or they're making enough noise to wake the dead. Elena watched him work with growing unease. You've really thought this through. 10 years alone teaches you to think defensively. Is that what this is? Defensive? Caleb secured the last wire. What else would it be? I don't know. Sometimes it feels like you're preparing for war. Maybe I am. He straightened, met her eyes. Hastings sent men to scout us, left a threat. He's not coming up here to talk, Elena. He's coming to take what he thinks belongs to him. So yeah, I'm preparing for war, and you should be too. She didn't argue, just nodded and helped him finish the traps. On the 4th day, Caleb taught her hand-to-hand combat. Basic stuff. How to break a hold, where to strike to disable, how to use someone's weight against them. They practiced in the clearing, moving slow at first, then faster as Elena learned the motions. What if I freeze? She asked during a water break. You won't. How do you know? Because I've seen you angry. I've seen you scared. And I've never once seen you quit. Caleb handed her a canteen. Fear's natural. Freezing is a choice. You're too stubborn to make that choice. Elena laughed, sharp and unexpected. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. They resumed practice, and Caleb found himself paying attention to things he shouldn't, the way she moved, the determination in her eyes, the fact that she trusted him enough to let him this close. It complicated things. Made him want to protect her not just because of the contract, but because somewhere along the way, she'd become something more than a stranger sharing his space. He didn't know what to do with that. The 5th day passed in tense preparation. They inventoried ammunition, checked weapons, ran through scenarios. What if they came at night? What if they came from multiple directions? What if they brought fire? We can't plan for everything, Elena said, frustration creeping into her voice. No, but we can plan for the most likely things and adapt the rest. And if we can't adapt fast enough? Caleb looked at her directly. Then we fight anyway, because giving up isn't an option. That night, Elena didn't go to the loft. She sat by the fire with Caleb, neither of them speaking, both of them thinking about what was coming. The silence stretched, comfortable despite the circumstances. Can I tell you something? Elena said eventually. Yeah. I'm glad it was you, at the auction. I know that probably sounds crazy, but she stopped, searching for words. If someone was going to buy me, I'm glad it was someone who saw me as a person instead of property. Caleb's throat tightened. I didn't buy you. You bid on me. To get you out, that's different. Is it? He thought about it. About the moment he'd stepped forward in that auction house, the anger that had driven him, the impulse he still didn't fully understand. I don't know, maybe not. But I meant what I said then. You don't owe me anything. Not gratitude, not loyalty, nothing. This situation we're in, it's my fault for not thinking it through, for not realizing Hastings wouldn't just let it go. You saved me from him once. Now you're doing it again. How is that your fault? Because I should have known better. Elena shifted closer, close enough that he could feel her warmth. Caleb, look at me. He did. I chose this. At the auction, on the ride up here, every day since. I chose you over him, and I'd make the same choice 100 times over. Whatever happens in 2 days, it's not your fault. It's his. And I'm not going to let you carry that guilt. Caleb wanted to argue, to push back against the absolution she was offering. But looking at her face in the firelight, at the certainty in her eyes, he found he couldn't. You should sleep, he said quietly. So should you. I will, in a bit. Elena stood, hesitated, then did something unexpected. She put her hand on his shoulder just for a moment. The touch was brief, almost nothing, but it sent electricity through him. Good night, Caleb. Good night. He watched her climb to the loft, then sat alone by the dying fire, trying not to think about the warmth of her hand or the way his name sounded in her voice. The 6th day, they drilled. Attack scenarios, retreat paths, what to do if they got separated. Caleb pushed Elena hard, harder than he probably should have, but she kept up. More than kept up, she anticipated, adapted, showed the kind of quick thinking that couldn't be taught. You're good at this, he said after she successfully disarmed him for the 3rd time. I'm motivated. Still, natural instincts count for a lot. Elena wiped sweat from her face. My mother used to say I was stubborn as granite. Guess she was right. Stubborns kept a lot of people alive. They practiced until the sun set, then ate in silence, both aware that tomorrow was the deadline. Tomorrow, Hastings' men would come or they wouldn't. Either way, everything was about to change. What do you think will happen? Elena asked. Honestly, I think he'll send men, probably at dawn when they think we're still asleep. Probably 3 or 4, enough to handle us, not so many he has to split the reward. And we'll be ready? As ready as we can be. Elena nodded, accepting it. If something goes wrong, if they get past you, I want you to know I won't let them take me alive. Caleb's head snapped up. Don't talk like that. I'm serious. I'd rather die up here than go back to him. You're not going to die, and you're not going back. I won't let either happen. You can't promise that. Watch me. They stared at each other across the table, wills locked. Finally, Elena looked away. I'm going to sleep, she said. Try to get some rest yourself. But neither of them slept much that night. Caleb lay in his bedroll listening to Elena shift restlessly in the loft above and thought about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. He'd been in fights before, survived situations that should have killed him. But this felt different. This time, he wasn't just protecting himself. This time, He had something to lose. Dawn came cold and gray, mist clinging to the trees like ghosts. Caleb was up before light, checking weapons, scanning the approaches, listening for anything out of place. Elena joined him silently, rifle in hand, face set. "Today," she said. Not a question. "Probably." They took positions, Caleb at the main window facing the trail, Elena at the side where she could cover the northern approach. They waited. An hour passed, then two. The sun burned off the mist, revealing empty forest. "Maybe they're not coming," Elena said. "They're coming. Hastings isn't the type to make empty threats." 3 hours. 4. Tension coiled tighter with each passing minute. Caleb's shoulders ached from staying ready, his eyes burned from staring at the same trees. Then he heard it. Faint, distant. A bell. One of the tripwires. "East approach," he said quietly. "At least 2, maybe more." Elena shifted, bringing her rifle up. Her hands were steady. "What do we do?" "We wait. Let them come to us." The sounds grew closer. Footsteps, the occasional snap of a twig. Whoever was out there wasn't being particularly careful. Either they were confident or they were stupid. Caleb suspected both. A figure emerged from the trees, then another. 3 men total, spread out, rifles ready. The one in front was tall, scarred, wearing a badge that caught the light. Bounty hunters. "Rourke," the lead man called. "We know you're in there. Come out peaceful, and nobody gets hurt." Caleb didn't respond. Waited. "We got paper on you. Murder warrant out of Clayton County. You can come easy or hard, but you're coming." Still nothing. The scarred man gestured to his companions. They started forward, cautious now, realizing something was off. "What about the girl?" one of them called. "We heard you got a woman up here." That's when Caleb knew Hastings had sent them. The murder warrant was probably real. 10 years was long enough for someone to issue paper. But the interest in Elena confirmed it. These weren't just bounty hunters. They were hired guns with a secondary objective. "Elena," Caleb said quietly, "when I say move, you drop and cover. Understand?" "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid. Be ready." He stood, stepped into the doorway, rifle aimed at the lead man's chest. The bounty hunters froze. "That's far enough," Caleb said. Scarface smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Caleb Rourke, you're a hard man to find. Then maybe you should have stopped looking." "Can't do that. Got a job to do." "Your job's going to get you killed." "Maybe. But there's 3 of us and 1 of you. I like those odds." "You're counting wrong." Elena stepped into view at the side window, rifle steady. "There's 2 of us. That makes it even." The bounty hunters exchanged glances. This wasn't what they'd expected. "Look," Scarface said, trying a different angle. "We're not here for the girl. Just you, Rourke. Come peaceful, and we'll leave her be." "Don't believe him," Elena said. "I don't." Caleb kept his rifle trained. "Here's my counteroffer. You turn around, walk back down that mountain, and forget you ever saw us. In exchange, you get to keep breathing." Scarface laughed. "You're in no position to make threats." "Neither are you. My finger's on the trigger. I can drop you before you blink. Your friends might get me after, but you'll be dead. That worth $500 to you?" The smile faded. Calculations ran behind Scarface's eyes. Risk versus reward, pride versus survival. "What about 1,000? A new voice called from the trees. Everyone turned. Byron Hastings stepped into the clearing, flanked by 2 more armed men. He looked exactly as Caleb remembered. Polished, composed, utterly confident. $1,000 for Rourke, dead or alive," Hastings continued, "and another 1,000 for the safe return of Miss Cross. That's $2,000, gentlemen, each." The bounty hunter's greed practically glowed. Hastings turned to the cabin, smile sharp as a knife. "Hello, Caleb. It's been a while." "Not long enough. I have to admit I'm impressed. You've survived up here longer than I expected, but all things come to an end." His eyes found Elena in the window. "Hello, Elena. I trust Mr. Rourke has been treating you well?" "Better than you ever would," she shot back. "Such loyalty. How touching. But loyalty doesn't pay debts, and you still owe me $3,000. "She doesn't owe you anything," Caleb said. "Those debts transferred to me as part of the marriage contract. You want money? You come after me. Oh, I intend to. But the thing is, Caleb, you don't have $3,000. I know this because I checked. Your family's assets were seized years ago, and you've been living off trap lines and wild game. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to surrender, stand trial for murder, and hang. And Elena is going to come back to Salvation Creek with me to settle her debts the way we originally agreed. That's not happening. It is actually, because you're outnumbered 6-2. And while I appreciate the dramatic standoff, it can only end one way. Caleb's mind raced. 6 men, all armed, spread out enough that he couldn't get more than 2 before the others returned fire. Elena was good, but not good enough to handle this. They needed an edge, something Hastings hadn't planned for. Then he remembered the northern trap. Elena, he said quietly, remember the deadfall? Her eyes widened slightly. She understood. Mr. Hastings, Elena called out, you want me? Come get me yourself. Hastings' smile widened. Is that an invitation? It's a challenge. Or are you too much of a coward to collect your own debts? His expression flickered, just for a second, but enough. Hastings had pride, and Elena had just kicked it. Fine, he said. Gentlemen, hold your positions. Miss Cross wants a conversation. Let's have one. He started forward, circling toward the side of the cabin where Elena's window faced north. His 2 personal guards followed, leaving the bounty hunters watching the front. Caleb tracked Hastings' movement, heart hammering. If this worked, they'd cut the numbers. If it didn't, they'd just handed Hastings exactly what he wanted. Hastings reached the corner of the cabin, started around toward the north side. His foot hit the trigger. The deadfall released with a crack like thunder. 200 pounds of log and stone came crashing down, catching one of the guards full on. The man went down screaming. The other guard dove left, straight into a pit trap they'd covered with branches. Hastings scrambled back, suddenly alone, suddenly vulnerable. Caleb burst through the door. The bounty hunters spun, rifles coming up. Caleb fired first, taking Scarface in the shoulder. The man dropped, weapon falling. The other 2 scattered, taking cover. Elena appeared at the window, rifle cracking. One of the bounty hunters yelped, grabbing his leg. It was chaos. Perfect, beautiful chaos. Caleb closed on Hastings, who'd drawn a pistol but looked terrified at the prospect of actually using it. Rich men who hired violence rarely wanted to commit it themselves. Drop it, Caleb said. Hastings hesitated. Caleb fired into the ground at his feet. I said drop it. The pistol fell. Behind them, gunfire continued. Elena was holding off the remaining hunters, but it wouldn't last. They needed to end this now. Call them off, Caleb ordered. Or what? You'll kill me? Hastings tried to sound brave. Failed. You're a dead man either way, Rourke. Maybe, but I'll make sure I take you with me. Something in Caleb's voice must have convinced him. Hastings raised his hands. Stand down, he shouted. Everyone stand down! The gunfire stopped. Slowly, the bounty hunters emerged from cover, hands raised. Elena kept them covered from the window. Caleb looked at the scattered, defeated men, at Hastings, pale and shaking, at the trap that had worked better than he'd hoped. They'd won. But as Caleb surveyed the scene, he knew this wasn't over. Not really. Hastings wouldn't let this go. Even if they sent him back down the mountain today, he'd come back with more men, more guns, more determination. The only way this ended was if they took the fight to him. Caleb met Elena's eyes through the window and saw the same realization dawning there. They couldn't hide forever. It was time to stop running. Caleb kept his rifle trained on Hastings while Elena climbed down from the cabin, her own weapon never wavering from the bounty hunters. The man with the shoulder wound, Scarface, was still conscious, breathing hard through clenched teeth. His companion with the leg injury had gone pale but quiet. The third bounty hunter looked ready to bolt. Tie them up, Caleb said to Elena. Use the rope from the barn. She moved quickly, efficient, while Caleb watched everyone at once. The guard who'd been hit by the deadfall wasn't moving anymore. The one in the pit trap was groaning, probably broken ribs. Hastings stood with his hands still raised, eyes darting between Caleb and the tree line like he was calculating escape routes. Don't even think about it, Caleb said. This is illegal detention, assault on lawful bounty hunters. You're making everything worse for yourself. Lawful. Caleb's voice was flat. You put a price on a woman's freedom, and you want to talk about lawful. The marriage auction was completely legal. Territorial law signed by... I don't care. Caleb stepped closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down, shut up, and wait while I figure out what to do with you. You can't just hit... Caleb fired into the dirt again, close enough to Hastings' boot that he jumped. I said shut up. Hastings shut up. Elena finished securing the bounty hunters, checking knots with the same careful attention she brought to everything. When she returned to Caleb's side, he could see the adrenaline still coursing through her, hands shaking slightly, breathing elevated, eyes bright. You all right? He asked quietly. I shot a man. You did. In the leg. I was aiming for center mass like you taught me. Missed. Lucky for him. Elena laughed, short and sharp. Yeah, lucky. She looked at the wounded men, at Hastings sitting in the dirt, at the chaos they'd created. What now? That was the question, wasn't it? They'd won the immediate fight, but Caleb knew enough about men like Hastings to understand that victory was temporary. Send him back to town and he'd return with the law, with more guns, with enough force to make resistance impossible. We need answers first, Caleb said. Real answers. He turned to Hastings. How'd you find us? I'm not telling you anything. Caleb looked at Scarface. How about you? Feel like talking? The bounty hunter grimaced. He hired us 2 weeks ago. Said there was a wanted man up on Iron Ridge with a reward. Showed us the poster, gave us half up front. When did he mention the girl? 3 days ago. Said she was property, stolen goods. Another 1,000 if we brought her back. Scarface's eyes shifted to Elena. No offense, miss. Plenty taken, Elena said coldly. How many people know we're up here? Caleb pressed. Just us and his men. He was keeping it quiet. Didn't want word spreading that someone had embarrassed him. That tracked. Hastings' pride was as big as his bank account. Having a mountain man snatch a woman from under his nose at public auction would sting. Caleb turned back to Hastings. Your turn. What's the real play here? This isn't just about the money. Hastings smiled, thin and ugly. You really don't understand, do you? This was never about her father's debts. Thomas Cross died owing me pennies. I could have written it off without blinking. Then what? It was about the land. Hastings' smile widened. Cross Ranch sits on the southern water route to the valley. Control that? Control water rights for half the territory. I've been buying up parcels for years, consolidating. Cross's property was the last piece I needed. Elena went very still. My father's ranch. You wanted his land. Of course. And when he refused to sell, well, Hastings shrugged. Accidents happen, hearts fail, debts come due. The words hung in the air like poison. You killed my father, Elena said quietly. I did no such thing. I simply ensured certain debts were called at certain times. If the stress affected his health, that's unfortunate, but not my responsibility. Caleb saw red. His finger tightened on the trigger, every instinct screaming to put a bullet between Hastings' eyes. But Elena's hand on his arm stopped him. Don't, she said. Not like this. He just admitted, I know what he admitted. But shooting him here makes you a murderer, makes us both murderers. Elena's voice was steady, despite the tears on her face. We do this right. We take him back to town. We make him confess in front of witnesses. He'll never do it. Then we make him. Caleb looked at her, this woman who'd learned to shoot in 6 weeks and just talked him out of killing a man who deserved it. She was right. Killing Hastings here solved nothing. It would make Caleb the villain again, justify every bounty hunter who came after them. All right, he said, we do it your way, but we need insurance. He turned to Scarface. You heard what he said about the debts, the land, all of it. The bounty hunter nodded. Heard it. You willing to testify to that? For what? Your freedom. And the original 500 for my bounty. Caleb gestured at the other injured hunters. Split 3 ways instead of 5. Better odds than you had an hour ago. Scarface considered it, calculating. What about him? He nodded at Hastings. What about him? Man like that has friends, money, power. We testify against him. We're dead men. Not if he's in jail. And if he's not? If his lawyers get him out? If the judge is in his pocket? Scarface shook his head. I've seen how this works. Rich men don't hang. They pay fines, serve months instead of years. walk out with their fortunes intact. Meanwhile, we're looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives. It was a fair point. Caleb had seen the same thing, the way justice bent around money like light around a star. Elena spoke up. What if we have proof? Not just testimony, but evidence. What kind of evidence? Records. Documents? Whatever he used to buy up my father's debts, consolidate the land claims. It's all in his office, isn't it? She looked at Hastings. You're too careful not to keep receipts. Hastings' smile faltered. That's what I thought, Elena said. So here's the deal. You tell us where the documents are, or we drag you back to town and let you explain to the sheriff why you hired bounty hunters to kidnap a married woman. The sheriff works for me. Maybe, but the mayor doesn't. Neither does Judge Morrison. And I know for a fact that Morrison's been looking for a reason to take you down for years. Elena crossed her arms. Your choice. Help us get the evidence or face charges without it. Caleb watched Hastings' face cycle through emotions. Anger, calculation, fear. The man was trapped and knew it. My office, Hastings said finally. Safe behind the painting. Combination is my daughter's birthday. You don't have a daughter, Elena said. No, but the combination is 187305, the date I opened the bank. Elena looked at Caleb. We need to get those documents. How? Walk into town, stroll into his office, crack his safe? Exactly that. That's insane. You have a better idea? Caleb didn't, which was the problem. They spent the next hour securing the camp. The wounded men were moved into the cabin. Not comfortable, but alive. The dead guard they buried 100 yards out, shallow grave marked with stacked stones. Hastings and the bounty hunters were bound hand and foot, watched over by Elena while Caleb prepared for what came next. When he returned from gathering supplies, Elena was waiting. I'm coming with you, she said. No. Yes. Elena, it's too dangerous. If something goes wrong, then I want to be there to help fix it. Besides, you need me. I know that office. I know the layout of the bank. You'll be stumbling around in the dark without me. She was right, which Caleb hated. If we do this, you follow my lead. No arguments, no improvising. I can agree to that. I'm serious, Elena. One mistake and we're both dead. I understand. Caleb studied her face, looking for doubt, for fear, found only determination. All right, he said. We leave at sunset. Gives us darkness for cover and time to get into position. They spent the afternoon planning. The bank sat on Main Street, 2 stories, brick construction. Hastings' office was on the second floor, rear window facing the alley. Getting in meant climbing, which meant noise, which meant risk. What about the front door? Elena suggested. Locked. What if it wasn't? Caleb looked at her. You have a key? No, but Sarah Jenkins does. She cleans the bank every evening. I know her from church. She used to bring pies to my father when he was sick. You think she'd help us? I think she hates Hastings as much as everyone else does. He cut her wages twice last year. Elena's expression was thoughtful. If I explained what we needed, big if. Everything about this is a big if. Fair point. They left the cabin as the sun touched the horizon, leaving Scarface and his companions tied but fed, guarded by tripwires and deadfalls that would alert them to any escape attempt. Hastings they brought with them, hands bound, mouth gagged with cloth. Insurance, Caleb explained when Elena questioned it, case anything goes wrong. The ride down took 2 hours, careful and slow in fading light. They approached Salvation Creek from the north, circling wide to avoid the main road. By the time they reached the edge of town, full dark had fallen. Caleb tied the horses in a copse of trees a quarter-mile out. Hastings he secured to a trunk, tight enough that struggling would be painful. You make a sound, I hear about it, and whatever happens to us happens to you twice as bad, Caleb told him. Understand? Hastings glared but nodded. Elena led the way into town, moving through back alleys with the confidence of someone who'd grown up here. They avoided the main street, kept to shadows, moved when noise from the saloon covered their footsteps. Sarah Jenkins lived in a small house behind the general store. Yellow light showed through her window, smoke from her chimney. Let me talk to her alone, Elena said. She'll be more likely to help if she's not staring down a wanted man. Caleb wanted to argue but couldn't find a reason that made sense. 5 minutes. If you're not back, I'm coming in. Elena knocked softly. The door opened, revealing a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back, flower on her apron. Her eyes widened. Elena Cross? Child, what are you doing here? Everyone thought... She stopped, seeing Caleb in the shadows. Who's that? A friend. Mrs. Jenkins, I need your help. Come inside, quickly, before someone sees. They entered the small, warm kitchen. Sarah closed the door, then turned to Elena with a mixture of relief and concern. We heard you married Caleb Rourke, that he took you up the mountain. Byron Hastings has been telling everyone you were kidnapped, that Rourke forced you. He's lying. I went willingly. I'm still willing. Elena glanced at Caleb. Mrs. Jenkins, do you still clean the bank? Every evening, 6 o'clock. Why? We need to get into Hastings' office, tonight. Sarah's expression hardened. What's he done now? Elena explained quickly. The debts, the land, the confession about her father. Sarah listened with growing anger, her hands clenching into fists. That snake, she muttered. I knew something was wrong when Thomas died so sudden. And the auction? She shook her head. All right, I'll help. But you need to be careful. Hastings has the sheriff in his pocket, half the town council too. We know. That's why we need evidence. Sarah retrieved a key from a drawer. This opens the front door. I'm supposed to lock up when I finish, but I'll leave it open tonight. Say I forgot. His office is second door on the right, top of the stairs. Thank you, Elena said. Don't thank me yet. Just promise me you'll expose that man for what he is. We will. They waited an hour, hidden in the alley behind the bank, watching Sarah work through the windows. She moved methodically, sweeping, dusting, emptying bins. When she finished, she exited the front door, made a show of checking it, then walked away. The lock clicked, but didn't catch. Now, Caleb whispered. They moved fast, slipping through the door, closing it behind them. The bank was dark except for moonlight through the windows. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Upstairs, Hastings' office was exactly as described. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, painting on the wall. Caleb went to the painting, lifted it carefully. Behind it, a safe. 187305, Elena said. Caleb worked the combination, holding his breath. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, stacks of documents, deeds, contracts, promissory notes. Caleb started pulling them out, scanning quickly. Elena helped, sorting through papers by moonlight. Here, she said suddenly, look at this. It was a ledger, entries in neat handwriting, names, dates, amounts. Thomas Cross appeared multiple times, debts listed and transferred. But there were others too, a dozen names, all with similar patterns. Debts consolidated, properties claimed, families displaced. He's been doing this for years, Elena said quietly. Not just my father. Dozens of people. Caleb kept searching, found more ledgers, more deeds. Then, at the back of the safe, a folder labeled Acquisitions. Inside was a map. It showed the entire valley, properties marked in different colors. Red for acquired, blue for targeted, green for completed transfers. Cross Ranch was marked red with a date 3 months ago, the day after Thomas died. This is it, Caleb said. This is everything we need. Take it all, every document, every ledger. They stuffed papers into a satchel Elena had brought, working quickly. When the safe was empty, Caleb closed it, replaced the painting. Let's go. They made it to the stairs before they heard voices outside. Caleb froze, gesturing Elena back. Through the window, he could see torches, men gathering. A lot of men. Someone saw us, Elena whispered, or Hastings got loose. The front door rattled, then burst open. Sheriff Garrett entered, gun drawn, followed by 6 deputies. Behind them, Byron Hastings, hands free, face triumphant. Told you they'd come, Hastings said. Thieves always return to the scene. Caleb's hand went to his pistol. Elena grabbed his wrist. Don't, she said quietly. We're outnumbered. She was right. 7 guns against 2, no cover, no escape route. Fighting meant dying. Caleb raised his hand slowly. Elena did the same. Sheriff Garrett climbed the stairs, weapon steady. Caleb Rourke, you're under arrest for murder, kidnapping, and theft. Elena Cross, you're under arrest as an accomplice. We didn't kidnap anyone, Elena said, and the only theft here is what Hastings has been doing for years. That's a serious accusation, Miss Cross. It's Mrs. Rourke, and I have proof. She gestured to the satchel. Documents from his safe showing how he's been manipulating debts, stealing land, destroying families. Garrett's eyes flicked to the satchel, then to Hastings. That true? Of course not. Those are private bank records stolen by criminals. Anything they show is taken out of context. Then you won't mind if the judge reviews them. Hastings' smile tightened. There's nothing to review. I'm within my legal rights as a creditor to collect debts and acquire collateral. Even if you cause the debts? Elena stepped forward despite Garrett's gun. Even if you manipulated circumstances to force people into impossible situations. Even if you killed my father to steal his land? The room went silent. Garrett lowered his weapon slightly. That's a hell of an accusation. It's the truth. And it's all in those documents. Elena pointed at the satchel. Dates, amounts, transfers. A pattern going back 5 years showing systematic fraud. She's lying, Hastings said quickly. She's been manipulated by Rourke. He's twisted her mind against me because I tried to collect legal debts. Legal? Elena's voice rose. You call forcing a woman into marriage to settle her dead father's debts legal? It was perfectly legal. Territorial law allows. I know what the law allows. I also know what human decency requires, and you've shown none of it. Garrett holstered his weapon. All right, everyone calm down. We're taking this to Judge Morrison. Tonight. Let him sort it out. That's not necessary, Hastings protested. I can explain everything to your satisfaction right now. I'm sure you can, but the judge gets final say on legal matters, not me. So we're going. All of us. Garrett gestured to his deputies. Bring them. They were escorted out of the bank into the street. A crowd had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Caleb recognized faces. Shopkeepers, ranchers, people who'd been at the auction. They stared at Elena with a mixture of shock and curiosity. Marcus Webb pushed through the crowd. Elena, is that really you? It's me, Marcus. We thought you were... Hastings said Rourke had kidnapped you. He lied. About that and a lot of other things. Elena raised her voice, addressing the crowd. Byron Hastings has been stealing from this town for years. My father's death wasn't natural. It was engineered. The debts he claimed weren't real. They were manufactured. And the auction wasn't legal. It was slavery dressed up in paperwork. The crowd murmured, shifting. She's delusional, Hastings called out. Rourke has poisoned her against me. I have evidence, Elena said. Documents from his own safe showing fraud, manipulation, and systematic theft. Judge Morrison can review them. The judge is asleep, someone pointed out. Then wake him up, Elena shot back. This can't wait. Garrett considered, then nodded. Deputy Harris, fetch the judge. Tell him it's urgent. Harris departed at a run. The crowd pressed closer, everyone talking at once. Caleb stayed quiet, watching Hastings' face. The banker was calculating again, looking for angles. Sheriff, Hastings said calmly, while we wait, perhaps you should secure the prisoners properly. Rourke is a wanted man, after all. Dangerous. Garrett hesitated, then called for chains. That's not necessary, Elena protested. I'm afraid it is, ma'am. Until the judge rules Rourke's still a fugitive. Garrett's voice was apologetic but firm. I'll make sure he's treated fairly. Caleb submitted to the chains without resistance. Fighting would only make things worse. The iron closed around his wrists, heavy and cold. Beside him, Elena's hand found his, squeezed once. It's going to be all right, she whispered. Caleb wished he believed her. They waited in the street, surrounded by deputies and curious townspeople. Minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, Judge Morrison appeared, robes hastily thrown over nightclothes, expression thunderous. This better be worth waking me for, he growled. It is, Your Honor, Elena said. We have evidence of systematic fraud by Byron Hastings. Morrison's eyebrows rose. Strong accusation. What kind of evidence? She handed him the satchel. Morrison opened it, pulled out documents, started reading. His expression changed as he scanned pages. Surprise, then anger, then cold fury. Where did you get these? He asked. Hastings is safe. They're his own records. You broke into my office, Hastings protested. Stole private documents. That's illegal search. I don't need a lecture on legal procedure from you, Byron. Morrison's voice could have cut stone. These documents show debts purchased below value, transferred at interest rates that violate territorial usury laws, and properties seized through questionable foreclosures. That's fraud. Multiple counts. Your Honor, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You can explain it at your trial. Morrison turned to Garrett. Sheriff, place Mr. Hastings under arrest. The crowd erupted. Hastings' face went white. You can't be serious, he sputtered. I'm a respected businessman, a pillar of this community. You're a thief and a con man, Morrison gestured to the deputies. Take him, and someone get these chains off Rourke. He's not the criminal here. The deputies moved to comply, but Hastings backed away, hand going to his coat. He pulled out a small pistol, the kind gamblers carried. I'm not going to jail, he said. Everyone froze. Hastings grabbed Elena, yanked her close, pressed the pistol to her temple. I'm walking out of here. Anyone tries to stop me, she dies. Caleb's blood turned to ice. Hastings, don't... Shut up. Hastings started backing toward the alley, dragging Elena with him. Drop your guns, all of you, now. The deputies looked at Garrett. Garrett looked at Morrison. Nobody moved. I said drop them. Hastings' voice cracked. The pistol shook against Elena's head. Caleb saw it all with terrible clarity. Hastings was panicking, desperate. Men like that made mistakes, fatal mistakes. It's over, Byron, Caleb said quietly. You let her go, you might survive this. You hurt her, and I promise you won't. You're in chains. You can't do anything. Want to bet? Hastings' eyes darted to the chains, to Caleb's face, to the crowd. Calculating, always calculating. Elena went limp. It was perfectly timed, perfectly executed. Her dead weight threw Hastings off balance. The pistol wavered. She twisted, drove her elbow into his ribs exactly like Caleb had taught her. Hastings gasped, grip loosening. Elena grabbed the pistol, turned it away, kneed him in the groin. Hastings went down. Elena stood over him, pistol in her hand, breathing hard. That's for my father, and for every family you destroyed. The crowd exploded into cheers. Deputies swarmed Hastings, hauling him to his feet, clapping chains on his wrists. He looked smaller now, diminished. Just a man who'd gambled everything and lost. Morrison approached Elena. That was remarkably brave, Mrs. Rourke. It was remarkably stupid, Elena corrected, handing him the pistol. But it worked. Garrett removed Caleb's chains. You're free to go, both of you, with the court's thanks. What about the murder warrant? Caleb asked. Morrison waved a hand. Given the circumstances described and the time elapsed, I'm inclined to dismiss it. Self-defense, protecting your sister from assault seems more than justified. Consider it handled. Caleb stared at him. 10 years of running ended with a wave. Just like that? Just like that. Though I'd suggest you stay out of trouble going forward. I can do that. The crowd pressed close, everyone wanting to shake Elena's hand, congratulate her, apologize for the auction. She handled it with grace, accepting thanks, deflecting praise. Caleb stood back, watching. This woman who'd been silent at her own auction now commanded the respect of an entire town. She'd been right, doing it right, facing it head-on, making Hastings confess in public. It had worked better than violence ever could have. Marcus Webb approached Caleb. For what it's worth, I'm glad you bid on her. Glad you got her out. Me too. You taking her back up the mountain? Caleb looked at Elena, surrounded by people who'd ignored her suffering until she'd forced them to see it. That's up to her. But when the crowd finally dispersed and they stood alone in the street, Elena answered the question he hadn't asked. Let's go home, she said. You sure? You could stay here now, start over, reclaim your father's ranch. The ranch is gone. Sold, done. But the cabin on Iron Ridge? She smiled. That's home. If you'll have me. Caleb's throat tightened. It's your home too, has been since the day you got there. They rode out of Salvation Creek as dawn broke, leaving behind a town that would never be the same. Hastings would stand trial, likely hang. The families he'd destroyed would get their properties back. Justice. Imperfect, but real. The ride up Iron Ridge felt different this time. Lighter. They talked easily, Elena describing the crowd's reaction, Caleb pointing out changes in the landscape. No silences that needed filling, no careful distance. When they reached the cabin, the sun was high. The bounty hunters were still secured, looking relieved to see them. We heard gunshots, Scarface said. Thought you were dead. Not dead, just delayed. Caleb cut them loose. Sheriff Garrett's waiting in town to hear your testimony. Show up by sunset, tell the truth, and you'll get your money. Run, and I'll track you down myself. The bounty hunters fled down the mountain without looking back. Caleb and Elena stood in front of the cabin, exhausted, exhilarated, alive. We did it, Elena said. You did it. I just kept you from getting shot. We did it together. She turned to him. That's how it works, right? Together? Caleb looked at her. This woman who'd been a stranger 6 weeks ago and was now something he couldn't name. Partner, friend, something more he didn't have words for. Yeah, he said quietly. Together. They went inside, and for the first time since Elena had arrived, the cabin felt exactly right. The days after they returned from Salvation Creek felt strange. Not bad strange, just different. Like the air had changed density, and they were both trying to figure out how to breathe in it. Caleb caught himself watching Elena more than he should. The way she moved around the cabin, confident now in a space that had been his alone for so long. The way she hummed while cooking, some tune he didn't recognize but found himself listening for. The way she'd look up from mending and catch him staring, and instead of looking away, she'd just smile. It unsettled him, all of it. 3 days after their return, Elena broke the careful peace they'd been maintaining. We need to talk about it, she said over breakfast. Caleb knew exactly what she meant. Had been avoiding it himself. Talk about what? Don't do that. Don't pretend you don't know. She set down her coffee. We're married. Legally, officially married. But we've been living like strangers who happen to share a house. You want to change that? I want to know what you want. Caleb stared into his cup. The question felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the ground would give way if he leaned too far forward. I don't know what I want. That's not true. How would you know? Because I see how you look at me. Same way I look at you when you're not paying attention. Elena's voice was steady, matter of fact. We can keep pretending, or we can be honest. Your choice. Caleb's chest tightened. He'd spent 10 years alone specifically to avoid conversations like this. Feelings were messy, complicated, dangerous. Easier to lock them away and focus on survival. But looking at Elena now, fearless as ever, he realized survival wasn't the same as living. I'm not good at this, he said quietly. At what? Talking, feeling, any of it. I spent a decade shutting down everything that wasn't absolutely necessary to stay alive. I know. And you're asking me to just, what? Turn it back on? Elena leaned forward. I'm asking you to try. That's all. Just try. Caleb thought about it. About the risks, the vulnerability, the 1,000 ways it could go wrong. Then he thought about Elena standing over Hastings with that pistol, about her hand finding his in the crowd, about coming home to a cabin that finally felt like one. All right, he said, I'll try. Something in Elena's expression softened. Good. Me too. They started small. Conversations that went beyond practical necessities. Caleb told her about his childhood on his family's ranch, about his sister Rebecca, and how she used to make him help with her chores in exchange for covering his. Elena talked about her mother, about learning to cook at 8, because someone had to, and her father was useless in the kitchen. He tried once, Elena said, laughing at the memory. Burned soup. Actual soup. I didn't even know that was possible. How do you burn soup? He forgot water was involved, just put the vegetables in a pot and walked away. She shook her head. My mother found him an hour later, vegetables charred black, house full of smoke, and him just staring at it like he'd discovered a new scientific principle. Caleb smiled. Actually smiled, and it felt strange on his face. What'd your mother do? Laughed until she cried, then made him promise to never touch the stove again. Elena's smile faded. She died 6 months later, fever. Nothing the doctor could do. After that, it was just me and him. You were 12. Yeah, old enough to work, young enough to still need a parent. But my father, he tried. He really did. Just couldn't make the ranch profitable without my mother's touch. She was the one who handled the money, the planning. He was good with animals, terrible with everything else. That why you ended up with Hastings's debts? Elena nodded. My father borrowed to keep going, borrowed more to pay back the first loans. Classic spiral. By the time I understood what was happening, it was too late. He was drowning and too proud to ask for help. You tried to help, though. Of course. But what could I do? I was 22, barely keeping our heads above water myself. She stared at the fire. When he died, part of me was relieved. Horrible to admit, but it's true. At least he didn't have to see what came after. Caleb reached across the table without thinking, put his hand over hers. You did everything you could. That's what matters. Elena's fingers curled around his. Sometimes I wonder if I should have fought harder, run faster, something. You stood in front of a room full of strangers and refused to break. You fought Hastings and won. That's fighting hard enough for anyone. She looked at their joined hands, then at his face. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. Just old enough to recognize courage when I see it. You're 32. That's not old. Feels old sometimes. Tell me about it. But Elena smiled when she said it and didn't let go of his hand. The physical distance between them started closing after that. Not dramatically, not all at once, just gradual shifts, sitting closer by the fire, working side by side instead of separately. Small touches that lingered, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing while passing plates. 1 week after their conversation, Elena came down from the loft and didn't go back up. Caleb woke that morning to find her bedroll laid out near his, close enough to share warmth but not touching. She was already awake, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Morning, she said. Morning. Caleb sat up, trying to ignore how aware he was of her proximity. You're not in the loft. No. Any particular reason? It's cold up there, and lonely. And I'm tired of pretending I want to be alone. Elena met his eyes directly. If that's a problem, say so now. It should have been a problem, should have triggered every defensive instinct he'd developed. Instead, Caleb found himself saying, it's not a problem. Good. They fell into a new rhythm after that. Slept near each other, close enough to hear breathing but respecting boundaries. It was intimate without being overwhelming, comfortable in a way Caleb hadn't expected. 2 weeks in, Elena woke from a nightmare gasping. Caleb was up instantly, hand going to the rifle before he registered what was happening. Elena sat upright, breathing hard, eyes wide in the darkness. You all right? He asked quietly. Bad dream. Sorry. Didn't mean to wake you. I was already awake. You're always awake. Fair point. Caleb rarely slept through the night, old habits dying hard. Want to talk about it? Elena hesitated, then nodded. I was back at the auction, but this time you didn't come. Hastings won the bid and I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything. That didn't happen. I know, but it could have. If you'd been 5 minutes later, if you'd decided it wasn't your problem, she wrapped her arms around herself. I keep thinking about all the ways it could have gone wrong. Caleb moved closer, not quite touching, but near enough to feel her warmth. It didn't go wrong. You're here, safe. Because of you. Because we fought for it. Both of us. Elena looked at him, really looked. In the firelight, her eyes were dark and deep and full of something that made Caleb's heart beat faster. Can I ask you something? She said. Yeah. Why did you really step forward that day? At the auction? You said you didn't know, but I think you did. I think you knew exactly why. Caleb thought about lying, deflecting. But they'd agreed to try honesty, and dishonesty felt wrong now. I saw you standing there, he said slowly, proud and terrified and refusing to show it, and I thought that's the kind of person who deserves better than what this town was giving her, better than being traded like property, better than men like Hastings deciding her worth. He paused. I thought if I could give you anything, freedom, choice, a chance, I should, even if I didn't understand why it mattered so much. And now, do you understand why? Caleb looked at her, at this woman who'd gone from stranger to partner to something he was afraid to name. Yeah, I think I do. Elena's hand found his in the darkness. Good, because I understand too. She leaned in slowly, giving him time to pull back. Caleb didn't pull back. When her lips met his, it was different from the kiss at the auction. Not a claim or a seal, but a question and an answer all at once. They broke apart after a moment, both breathing hard. That okay? Elena asked. Yeah, that's okay. They didn't sleep together that night, not in the full sense, But they slept close, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, and when morning came, neither wanted to move. The changes came faster after that, not just physical closeness, but emotional honesty. Caleb told her about the nightmares he still had about Clayton Mercer, about the guilt he carried for leaving his family, about the fear that he was too damaged to be good for anyone. Elena listened without judgment, then shared her own fears, that she wasn't strong enough, wasn't smart enough, that eventually Caleb would realize marrying her had been a mistake. "That's not happening," Caleb said firmly. "How do you know?" Because every day I wake up and you're here, and this place feels more like home than it ever did alone. Because you make me want to be better instead of just surviving. Because—" He stopped, fumbling for words. "Because I'm falling in love with you, and that scares me more than any bounty hunter ever could." Elena went very still. "Say that again." "Which part?" "The love part." Caleb's throat was tight. "I love you. I think I have since you stood up to Hastings with that pistol. Maybe before." "Good." Elena's smile was trembling. "Because I love you too. Even though you snore and can't cook worth a damn and sometimes go 3 days without talking just because you're thinking." "I don't snore." "You absolutely snore." "Fine, I snore. But I love you anyway." They kissed again, longer this time, and when they broke apart, Elena said, "We're really doing this, aren't we? Making this real. Feels pretty real already. You know what I mean. This marriage, making it more than just paperwork." Caleb thought about it, about the risks and the vulnerability and the fact that loving someone meant giving them the power to destroy you. Then he thought about Elena's courage, her strength, the way she'd fought for both of them when he'd forgotten how. "Yeah," he said, "we're really doing this." Winter came early that year, first snow falling in October. They spent it preparing, stockpiling firewood, preserving food, winterizing the cabin. The work was hard but satisfying, made easier by working together. One night in November, Elena sat by the fire mending clothes while Caleb cleaned his rifle. Domestic, comfortable, completely ordinary in the best possible way. "I've been thinking," Elena said. "About?" "The future, what comes after winter." "What do you mean?" "I mean, this cabin is small. We're managing now, but if we want to expand, build more, maybe start a family someday." She trailed off, watching his reaction. Caleb set down the rifle. "You want kids?" "Eventually. Maybe. Do you?" He'd never thought about it. 10 years alone had made the idea of family seem impossible. But looking at Elena now, imagining a child with her eyes and his stubbornness, it didn't seem impossible anymore. "I think I could," he said carefully. "Not right away, but someday." Elena smiled. "Good, because I was thinking we could add a room to the cabin in spring. Maybe 2. Make this place feel less like a hideout and more like a home. It already feels like home. You know what I mean, a real home, the kind that lasts." Caleb did know, and the idea didn't terrify him the way it would have 6 months ago. In December, a rider came up the mountain. Caleb saw him from a distance, grabbed his rifle by instinct. Elena put a hand on his arm. "Wait, that's Marcus Webb." She was right. The shopkeeper rode into the clearing slowly, hands visible, clearly not a threat. "Caleb Rourke?" "Elena?" Marcus called. "I come in peace, just bringing news." They met him outside. Marcus dismounted, looking uncomfortable. "What news?" Caleb asked. "Hastings was convicted. All charges. Judge Morrison threw the book at him. Fraud, theft, conspiracy. He's going to prison for 20 years. Elena let out a breath she'd been holding. "It's really over." "It's over. And the properties he seized, they're being returned to the original families, or in cases where families moved on, sold fair and square with the money going back to them." Marcus pulled an envelope from his coat. "Which brings me to this." Elena took the envelope, opened it. Inside was a deed and a bank draft. "Your father's ranch," Marcus explained. "Judge Morrison ruled the foreclosure was fraudulent. Property reverts to you. And the buyer who purchased it from Hastings, once they found out the sale was illegal, they agreed to compensation. That's what the draft is for." Elena stared at the papers, hands shaking. This is more money than my father ever made in his best year. It's fair value for the land, plus interest and damages." Marcus shifted his weight. So you planning to come back down, rebuild the ranch? Elena looked at Caleb. He kept his expression neutral, even though his heart was hammering. This was her choice, her land, her money, her future. He wouldn't try to influence it. No, Elena said finally. Sell the ranch. Fair market value, no special deals. Take the money and distribute it to the families Hastings hurt, the ones who lost everything. Marcus blinked. All of it? All of it. They need it more than I do. Elena, that's a fortune. You could live comfortable for the rest of your life. I am living comfortable. I have everything I need. She handed the papers back. Make sure it goes to people who actually need help. Families with kids, people who lost their homes. And Marcus? Make sure it's anonymous. I don't want thanks or recognition. Marcus took the papers slowly, looking at her with something like awe. You're sure? I'm sure. After Marcus left, Caleb turned to Elena. You didn't have to do that. I know. That money could have changed everything for us. Made things easier. We don't need easy. We need right. Elena leaned against him. My father lost that ranch trying to help people. This feels like finishing what he started. Caleb wrapped his arms around her. You're a better person than I am. That's not true. You just show it differently. Winter deepened. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. Elena taught Caleb to read better. He'd learned basics as a kid, but never gotten comfortable with it. He taught her advanced tracking, things that went beyond survival into actual skill. On the shortest day of the year, Elena woke Caleb before dawn. Come on, she said. I want to show you something. They hiked to the ridge overlook, the same spot where Caleb used to stand and look down at Salvation Creek. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the snow-covered valley in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful, Elena said. Yeah. I used to hate winter. Reminded me of my mother dying, of everything being cold and hard. She leaned against him. But this year it's different. This year it feels like possibility instead of loss. Caleb understood. Winter had always been about survival for him, making it through to spring. But standing here with Elena, watching the sun rise on a new day, it felt like more than that. It felt like beginning instead of ending. I want to ask you something, Elena said. All right. That night at the auction, when you kissed me, was it real or was it just for show? Caleb thought back to that moment. The anger, the impulse, the feeling of rightness when their lips met. I didn't know then. But looking back, yeah, it was real. I just didn't understand it yet. And now? Now I understand. He turned to face her fully. I love you, Elena Rourke. Not because of a contract or a debt or any legal obligation. Because you're brave and stubborn and you make me want to be better than I am. Because coming home to you feels like the first good thing I've done in 10 years. Elena's eyes were bright with tears. That's the most words I've ever heard you string together. Don't get used to it. She laughed, kissed him, and for a moment they stood there on the ridge, just two people who'd found each other against all odds. Spring came slowly, snow melting to reveal new growth. They started building the additions to the cabin, working together to expand their home. It was hard work, progress measured in inches, but satisfying in a way that hunting or trapping never was. One afternoon in April, while they were raising a beam for the new room, Elena stopped suddenly. What's wrong? Caleb asked. Nothing. I just realized I'm happy. Actually, genuinely happy. She looked around at the half-built room, the forest, the mountain. 6 months ago, I was standing in an auction house waiting to be sold. Now I'm building a future with someone I love. It's a lot. Good lot or bad lot? Best lot. She smiled. How did we get here? You chose to fight. I chose to help. Everything else followed. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we just complicate it by overthinking. Elena laughed. Philosophy from Caleb Rourke. What's next, poetry? Don't push your luck. They finished the room in May. Not fancy, not perfect, but solid and warm, and theirs. That night they moved their things into the new space, leaving the main cabin for living and the addition for sleeping. Feels strange, Elena said, looking around, having this much space. Good strange or bad strange? Good. Definitely good. She turned to him. We did this. Built something from nothing. We did. Think we can keep doing it? Building things together? Caleb pulled her close. I think we can do anything as long as we do it together. It was corny. Completely, utterly corny. But it was also true, and that's what mattered. Summer brought news from town. Marcus rode up again in June, this time with a letter. From your sister, he told Caleb. Caleb's hand shook as he took it. 10 years. 10 years of silence, and he'd assumed his family had written him off. He opened it slowly, afraid of what he'd find. The letter was short. Rebecca had married, moved to California, started a family. Their parents had passed 3 years ago, within months of each other. She'd tried to find Caleb, hired investigators, but he'd disappeared too completely. Then she'd heard about the trial, about Caleb Rourke, who'd stopped a corrupt banker and saved a town. She'd wondered if it could be the same Caleb Rourke who'd disappeared after defending her. I don't blame you for what happened, she wrote. I never did. Mercer got what he deserved, and you saved me when no one else would. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. You deserve both. She included her address in California and a standing invitation to visit. Caleb read it 3 times, then handed it to Elena without speaking. She read it quietly, then put her hand on his arm. You gonna write back? She asked. I don't know what to say. Start with the truth. Tell her you're alive, you're well, and you're not alone anymore. So he did. Wrote a letter that was awkward and stilted but honest, telling Rebecca about Elena, about the cabin, about finding something worth fighting for. He mailed it the next time they went to town. 3 weeks later, Rebecca wrote back. The correspondence continued through the summer, slow but steady, rebuilding a connection that had been severed by violence and fear. In August, Elena found Caleb sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. What are you thinking about? She asked. How different everything is. A year ago I was alone, hiding, convinced I'd die up here without ever talking to another soul. Now, he gestured at the cabin, at her. Now I have this, you, a future. Having regrets? No, just having trouble believing it's real. Elena sat beside him. It's real. You want proof? She took his hand, placed it on her stomach. This is real. Caleb froze. Are you? About 6 weeks along. Dr. Peterson confirmed it when I went to town last week. 1,000 emotions hit Caleb at once. Fear, joy, terror, wonder. You're pregnant. I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a mother. We'll figure it out together. Elena squeezed his hand. That's what we do, right? Figure things out. Caleb pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear. A baby. Their baby. Another person who would depend on them, trust them, need them. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like completion. We're really doing this, he said. We really are. I love you. I love you too. They sat there as the sun set, planning a future that had seemed impossible a year ago. Names to consider, changes to make, ways to prepare. It was overwhelming and beautiful and real. The pregnancy progressed through fall. Elena handled it with typical stubbornness, refusing to slow down until Caleb practically forced her to rest. They spent the winter preparing, building a cradle, stockpiling supplies, making plans. In February, on a night when the snow fell heavy and quiet, Elena went into labor. It was hard, longer and more difficult than either expected. Caleb had delivered foals and calves, but this was different, terrifying in a way that combat never was. Elena was strong, stronger than he'd ever seen her, but there were moments when he wondered if they'd both make it through. Dawn broke over Iron Ridge, cold and clear, and with it came a sound Caleb had never heard before. A baby, crying. Their daughter was small, red-faced, perfect. Elena held her with shaking hands while Caleb stared in disbelief. We made this, Elena said, wonder in her voice. We made a person. We did. What should we name her? They discussed names, never settled on one, but looking at his daughter now, one name felt right. Hope, Caleb said. Her name is Hope. Elena smiled through tears. Perfect. Hope Rourke. The baby, Hope, was everything. Demanding, exhausting, completely worth it. Caleb learned to change diapers, warm bottles, function on 3 hours of sleep. Elena learned that asking for help wasn't weakness. Together, they learned that love could expand to include someone who couldn't even talk yet. Spring came again. A year and a half since the auction, since two strangers became something more. One morning in April, Caleb stood on the ridge overlook, the same spot where he'd looked down at Salvation Creek with contempt, where he'd later watched the sunrise with Elena. Now he held his daughter, showing her the valley below. "See that?" he told Hope, who drooled contentedly. "That's where I met your mother, where she saved me without even knowing it." Elena joined them, slipping her arm around his waist. "Talking to yourself?" "Talking to our daughter." "She can't understand you yet." "Doesn't matter. I'm practicing." They stood there together, a family that had been forged in fire and desperation, tempered by choice and love. The mountain that had been Caleb's prison had become his sanctuary. The woman who'd been sold at auction had become his partner. The life he'd thought was ending had somehow just begun. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come to town that day?" Elena asked. Caleb thought about it. "I try not to. Can't change the past. Only live with the present." "But if you could go back knowing what you know now, would you do it again? Would you still bid on me?" "In a heartbeat. Even knowing how hard it would be? The fights, the fear, all of it? Especially knowing that. Because it led here, to you, to her, to this." He gestured at the cabin, the mountain, their life. "I spent 10 years thinking I was too broken to deserve happiness. You proved me wrong. You weren't broken. You were just waiting for the right person to see you clearly." "Same goes for you." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "We saved each other, didn't we?" "Yeah, we did." Hope squirmed, making baby sounds that might have been agreement or might have been gas. Either way, it made them both laugh. Below, in Salvation Creek, life continued. The town had changed after Hastings' trial. People learned that silence had consequences. That turning away from injustice made you complicit. It wasn't perfect. Nowhere was perfect. But it was better. On Iron Ridge, the Rourke family lived. Not happily ever after. Life didn't work that way. There were hard days, arguments, moments of doubt. But there was also love, partnership, and the understanding that they'd chosen each other and kept choosing each other every single day. That night, after Hope was asleep and the cabin was quiet, Elena and Caleb sat by the fire. "Tell me something," Elena said. "What do you think you would have become if we'd never met? Probably dead, definitely alone." Caleb pulled her closer. "You? Broken? Or bitter? Or both?" She paused. "But I think the real question isn't what we would have become. It's what we are now." "And what's that?" Elena smiled. "Free. Finally, completely free." Caleb understood. Not free from responsibility or work or fear. Those things were part of life. But free from the past that had defined them. Free from other people's expectations. Free to build something real and honest and entirely their own. "Yeah," he said quietly, "we're free." Outside, the wind moved through the pines, carrying the scent of spring growth and new beginnings. Inside, two people who'd started as strangers held each other close, and a baby slept peacefully in a hand-carved cradle. The beast of Iron Ridge was gone. In his place was just a man, flawed, scarred, learning to love and be loved. And beside him was a woman who'd refused to be broken, who'd fought for her own freedom and his, who made home feel like more than just walls and a roof. They'd been forged in fire and fear, these two, shaped by loss and desperation into something harder than either had been alone. But that hardness wasn't brittle. It was resilient, strong enough to shelter the new life they'd created, the future they were building one day at a time. Caleb thought about the question Elena had asked. Would he do it all again, knowing the cost? The answer was simple. He'd do it 1,000 times over. Because choosing Elena, fighting for her, building this life with her, it was the first truly good thing he'd done in 10 years. And it was only the beginning. Years would pass. Hope would grow, maybe gain siblings. The cabin would expand. The mountain would change seasons. Life would continue with all its messy, complicated beauty. There would be joy and sorrow, triumph and failure, moments of pure happiness and days of grinding difficulty. But through it all, one truth would remain constant. They'd chosen each other. And that choice, renewed every morning, was what made everything else possible. The fire burned low. Elena's breathing evened into sleep. Caleb held her, listening to Hope's quiet sounds from the cradle, and felt something he'd thought lost forever. Peace. Not the peace of silence or isolation, the peace of belonging, of being seen completely and loved anyway, of building something worth protecting and having someone to protect it with. Outside, Iron Ridge stood silent under the stars, witness to a transformation that had nothing to do with magic or miracles. Just two people, taking broken pieces and fitting them together into something whole. Just courage and choice, and the stubborn refusal to give up when everything seemed lost. Just love, in the end. Simple, complicated, entirely human love. And that, Caleb thought as sleep finally claimed him, was more than enough. It was everything.